They say death comes in threes. For Cristiana Magnasco, there was a reality she had to face within her own small family, a holy trinity of death, destruction, and bad choices. She was the mother of Joseph Joe Maggs Magnasco, the subject of our story. But to understand his end, we have to start at the beginning. Joseph Anthony Magnasco was born in New York City on February 5, 1925, and the first tragedy in the Magnasco family happened when Joe was only 5 years old. His father, Pietro, was a Brooklyn racketeer and a union organizer for the Pastry Makers Union. In January 1930, he was arrested for the November 1929 murder of a man named Michael Lanzarone, who had been shot 4 times by a passing car as he was standing in front of a bar. The court eventually dropped the case against Pietro for lack of evidence, but the streets don't need a jury. 4 months later in May, Pietro kissed Cristiana goodbye and hopped into a car with friends at 4 a.m. A few hours later, his bullet-ridden body was found on a roadside in Whippany, New Jersey. The police report noted a chilling ritual. His hands were folded across his chest and his hat was placed at his feet. 2 of Magnasco's friends were later arrested and charged with his killing, a message sent and received. The second blow came in 1959. Joe's uncle on his mother's side was Francesco Frankie Shots Abbatemarco, a powerful figure in the Profaci, later Colombo family, who got a start with the infamous Frankie Yale. Frankie Shots joined the Profaci family after Yale's murder in 1928 and allegedly rose to a capo position. But by 1959, he fell out of favor with his boss, Joe Profaci, for withholding tribute payments, a big no-no in that life. So in November of that year, Profaci sent the Gallo brothers to take out Frankie Shots, and that was that, or so Old Man Joe thought. Ironically, however, this was the fuse that started the Profaci-Gallo War of the early 1960s because Profaci withheld the family's lucrative policy racket that he had promised to the Gallos once they delivered on the contract, causing the Gallos to rebel against their boss. Joe's cousin and Frank's son, Anthony Abbey Shots Abbatemarco, was also on Profaci's hit list, but dodged the bullets by going into hiding. When he returned, he sided with the Gallos. It seems Profaci was a bigger enemy than the men who actually pulled the trigger on his father. Abbey Shots went on to have a long and successful career in the family, eventually rising to the rank of underboss under Thomas DeBella in the 1970s before dying of natural causes in 2005. Joe Maggs himself was a man who actually had a way out. He enlisted in the Marines in 1944 and served with the 6th Marine Division. He was wounded in battle in August 1945, right at the finish line of the war, and he even served another year before being honorably discharged in 1946. He was a war hero with a choice, but with a racketeer father, a gangster uncle, and a childhood friend named Carmine Persico, his path seemed inevitable, and he just traded one uniform for another. His criminal career started almost immediately. By 1947, he was arrested for a botched robbery of a ticket taker at the Limbrook Railroad Station. He clubbed the woman over the head and tied her up, but he got so spooked by her screams that he fled, leaving nearly $1,700 in cash sitting right on the desk. Surprisingly, there were 20 passengers sitting in the waiting room at the time of the robbery, but not one person noticed a single thing. By July 1950, Joe was part of a high-stakes robbery crew. In early July, he and his crew robbed the John J. Casale trucking firm of nearly $2,000 in cash and checks. 2 weeks later, they were caught in an elaborate theatrical sting in Harrison, New York. The DA had set up a 30-room mansion to look like a high society party, complete with floodlights and 21 hidden cops. When Joe's crew pulled up for the score, a gun battle broke out. 30 shots were fired, but luckily no one was hit. Joe was convicted and served 4 years at the Elmira Reformatory. In 1957, a few years after he got out of prison, Joe was made into the Profaci family and placed in Harry Fontana's Brooklyn crew. That same year, he married Frances Corso. His best man was Carmine Persico, future Colombo family boss and one of the family's deadliest hitmen. The snake was even the godfather to Joe's first child. Joe eventually switched sides, following his buddy to the Gallo faction during the war. but he learned very quickly that Persico couldn't keep his loyalties straight. In July 1960, Joe was arrested along with Persico for hijacking a truck containing $75,000 worth of cotton goods. Persico was released on $25,000 bail. Magnasco told authorities his wife was expecting a baby and wanted to take her to the hospital, and he too was released on $25,000 bail. On June 19, 1961, the two were convicted and remained free on bond pending sentencing. But by August 1961, Persico had switched back to the Profaci side of the war, and that month he had lured Larry Gallo to a meeting at the Sahara Lounge to try to negotiate an end to the conflict, but it was all a ruse. Persico and Profaci loyalist Salvatore Sally D. D'Ambrosio had snuck up on Gallo and tried to garrote him to death, but a police officer named Marvin Bly happened to come into the lounge, noticed a man's legs sticking out of the side of the bar, and knew something was wrong. But before Bly could act, Persico and Sally D. ran out and Officer Bly was shot in the face. He survived, as did Larry Gallo. Joe Maggs himself had been sought for questioning in the Gallo case but had evaded police. At one point, he was believed to have driven the getaway car. A little over a month later, during sentencing for that hijacking case, a betrayed Joe Magnasco spat in Persico's face and denounced him loudly for his part in Gallo's attempted murder. Because of this disruption, the judge had to adjourn the sentencing to the following month. But Joe Maggs never made it to his court date. On Wednesday, October 4th, 1961, Magnasco was shot and killed as he stepped out of the College restaurant on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. A few minutes later, Lucille Abbatemarco, Anthony's wife, stepped out of a nearby building, saw the crowd, walked over and shouted, "My God, that's my cousin Joe." At the time, police reported Magnasco had been shot 4 times at close range before the killer escaped in a brown Buick with 3 other men. Joe's wife told police she hadn't seen her husband in 3 days. 15 minutes after the shooting, area detectives went to the Gallo Gang headquarters on President Street in Brooklyn and rounded up 11 men, including Larry and Joe Gallo and Anthony Abbatemarco, and hauled them to the station for questioning. At the time, police speculated that the Gallo Gang had killed Joe Maggs because they had mistakenly believed he had failed to turn over $6,900 in robbery profits. Interestingly enough, Abbatemarco was free on $25,000 bail after being charged in the shooting of Patrolman Marvin Bly at the Sahara Lounge back in August. The Gallo Gang members were questioned for hours before being released. A week later, even some of their wives were brought in for questioning, including Abby Shots' wife, Lucille. Crazy Joe Gallo was also there that day, having been brought in for even more questioning. And afterwards, he decided to hold a mini press conference for the throng of reporters, answering their questions in a way only Joe Gallo could. Here are some of his more interesting responses. On the police, why don't they take all these cops they got assigned to this case and put them on the beat so they can pick up sex perverts, dope peddlers, and muggers? On Joe Profaci, Joe's a kind, religious old man. On the Mafia, there's no such thing as the Mafia. If all these people want to watch The Untouchables, that's all right with us, but I wish they'd stop trying to make us fit that format. And when asked about the Magnasco murder, he said, maybe he was fooling around with somebody's wife. Magnasco was a guy who went out with girls, and maybe some husband killed him. Soon after the Gallo Gang members were brought in for questioning, authorities issued a nationwide police alert for Sally D'Ambrosio. They had been looking for him since Larry Gallo's attempted garroting at the Sahara Lounge and wanted to question him about the Magnasco murder as well. But since they couldn't find him, they brought in his girlfriend, Palma Vitali. She was later accused of perjury before the Kings County Rackets grand jury investigating Magnasco's murder. Authorities believed she was hiding D'Ambrosio. Later that month, on the same day, Persico was sentenced to 15 years for that $75,000 hijacking charge. Police revealed detailed information about Magnasco's final hours. According to police, Magnasco spent most of the afternoon huddled with the rest of the Gallo Gang at their headquarters on President Street. About mid-afternoon, he left to visit his mother, who lived in the neighborhood, and later met up with fellow Gallo Gang member and Profaci soldier Salvatore Mangiamelli, who lent him his car. He picked up 4 friends at a tavern and drove to the college restaurant for a meeting that would end his life. He had gotten aggressive with his former capo, Harry Fontana, and the minute Joe laid hands on him, Harry's brother Sally pulled out a revolver and shot Magnasco dead. Magnasco would be alive today if he had followed Larry Gallo's instructions, the assistant chief inspector of Brooklyn South detectives told reporters. Gallo told him to stay inside. Magnasco insisted on going to see his mother, so he's dead. Joe Maggs was only 36 years old. He left behind a wife and 2 small children, like father, like son, they say. For Christiana, it was the ultimate tragedy, getting that knock on the door after just spending time with her son. She had lost a husband, a brother, and now her son to wrong choices and senseless violence. On a personal note, I lost my husband when my son was 5 years old. I have no ties to that life, but that kind of loss is a universal thing. To raise children alone, and in Christiana's case, to lose them to the streets when they could have been so much more, is heartbreaking. Joe Maggs is buried at Long Island National Cemetery. He rests there as the war hero he was, a permanent reminder of the man he could have become if he had only chosen the right path.